Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mishi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Mishi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Before we get into our meeting, I would just like to take a moment to offer our condolences to Brent DeVolen's family as we learned of Brent's passing this week. Many of us worked directly with Brent and as one of our peers for a number of years. He was mayor of Minden Hills from between 2014 and 2022 and acted as county warden on our behalf in 2017. He's served in the community in so many different ways that he surely will be missed by us all. Brent was passionate about his family and his community, and I think that says everything about him. If with everyone's indulgence, I turn the meeting over briefly to Councillor Burton, and we'll have a moment of silence for Brent.
Thank you, Board. And a couple of days ago, we lost a great individual, a great human being in Haliburton County. And, Brent DeVolen, Mayor of Minden Hills, on County Council for a couple of terms with me, Warden of the county, and I enjoyed very, very much my time that I had spent with Brent. He brought a lot to the table. With his skills, with his debate, and we had a good 8 years. I would like to say that our thoughts and prayers go out to the DeVolen family at this difficult time. And I would like us just to have a moment's silence in Brent's memory. Please stand. I cherish his memory in my heart. Thank you. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. As to the adoption of the agenda, excuse me, we will have one addition, and that would be an appointment to the HHS board. As Councillor Fury has decided that this is something that he cannot do at this time, so that will be added under other business under item number 12. So if I could have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as amended, Councillor Fury, Councillor Royale.
Be it resolved that the July 24th, 2024 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest Apologies for a brief moment of technical difficulties. Under item number 6, I don't believe we have any business arising from our previous meeting. So we will move into delegations. And our delegation today is with respect to our county's wayfinding strategy. And we have with us today Stasia Stemsky, who is the principal of the county wayfinding strategy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good.
So we'll turn the floor or the screen, I should say, I guess, over to you.
Okay, this is, I haven't done the Zoom thing for a little while, so I'm just going to fumble through at the very beginning here before I figure out to share my screen with you all so that I can flip through our presentation. Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm excited to be here and to share with you our progress on the wayfinding strategy for Haliburton County. So I am now sharing my screen there. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so what I will be sharing with you today, a little bit of introduction about my company. We'll walk through what wayfinding actually is, a project overview, parts of a wayfinding system, where we are in the overall project, what we've heard so far, and what we have in the works to date. So a little bit about Plural. We are a landscape architecture firm primarily. We do design planning as well. And we have been in the works for over 20 years now and working on destination environments, conservation areas, residential developments, urban and rural communities. And many of those rural communities are those that have a destination flair or tourism bent to them as well. Our services are offered to regions, municipalities, BIAs, various communities, service and focus groups, government agencies, developers, and other consultants as well. We have been working with wayfinding projects probably now for over about 15 years. We started up in Centre Wellington and have been working on various scales and sizes of wayfinding strategies for quite some time now. So wayfinding, what is wayfinding? I mentioned this to many people that we do wayfinding. Oh, what is that? And really all it is navigating one's way through an environment, through both built environments and natural environments. It's about organizing various bits of information so that you're able to go from A to B. It's not just about sign design, but it's a bit more about that overall system, understanding where one wants to go, how are they finding that information, what is the support of that information along the way, and how do they know they've actually arrived at the other end. So a successful plan assesses and identifies issues and sources of confusion in the environment so that you can have a high quality communication solution and that you end up with a happy traveler at the end because they've reached where they want to go. The overall wayfinding process, it is very much a process and it is a little bit cyclical as well. So we understand points of entry into various areas. There are many overlapping points of entry, especially in a county such as Haliburton that is comprised of various municipalities, townships, and subsequent settlement areas. So we really are focusing on gateways, entries, and then those directional pieces that inform and help the traveler move along. Oops, sorry. Let's see here. Next one. So project overview. We're really working in 3 phases. We started last fall working on our foundations research. So this would have been all of the background information that's required to get moving on a strategy. So various mappings, destination lists, finding out where tourists like to go, or where local people also go, and maybe they're new to the community and need to have a little bit of assistance going to various places. We engaged with some stakeholders, did some document review, and all of this would help move us forward. And we're constantly referring to that research as we move forward as well. Phase 2, sign design and location plan. So once we know where we're going, we have it all mapped out and figure out where signage needs to go, what needs to happen on those signs in terms of messaging, and comprise various charts and so on. Sign design happens at this point as well. We come up with concepts for the designs, which are then vetted through yourselves to ultimately come up with the best design. Implementation strategy as well. How do we get all of that information off the table and into the ground? So we'll offer recommendations on how to move that forward. So currently we're a little bit in phase 1 and a little bit in phase 2, phase 3, phase 2 and phase 3. We're somewhere there in the middle. Strategy components. So here we have different things that comprise the overall strategy. First being the destination list. There are so many destinations. We have to somehow prioritize what those destinations are. In some places, we're not able to get all of those destinations on a sign because there would be too many destinations to comprehend for the driver. So it needs to be prioritized. Destination node and route identification. So very important in terms of allowing a traveler to navigate successfully. The strategy there may be getting them directly to a route without any conflict. On the other hand, it's also interesting to allow that driver to discover new things that maybe they didn't know were there, or have them go by other areas of interest. Sign location mapping and messaging. So the specific sign types, there are many sign types within a family of signs. So they are allocated to those different sign locations. And then of course the messaging charts align with those locations as well. Sign concepts, those would be, what do the signs actually look like? So we are using different themes and styles that are evocative of the county. Excuse me. Ultimately, we'll come up with a preferred sign concept so we can move the concept forward and come up with a comprehensive family of signs, which would incorporate the smallest sign that might be something like a boat launch sign right through to all the different types of directional signs that might capture messaging and maybe using symbols such as parking symbols or swimming symbols or beach symbols right through to your gateway signs, which is the higher end sign. The final strategy component would be the phased implementation strategy and an overall excuse me, budget for the project. So where we are right now, we did visit your communities back, I think it was earlier in the year. So we drove through and we took an account of a very high level account. It's difficult to capture every sign, but a high level photo documentation of the types of signs that we currently find in Haliburton. So as you can see, we have quite an assortment of highway signs, identification signs that are more unique, and various service signs as well. So through the process identifying routes and nodes, this is where we understand and locate all of the different roads and access routes that link your communities together. The MTO roads, we have 60 at the top, 35 that wiggles on down through the western side. We've got 118 as the thread that joins everyone through the center, and down from east to west. The nodes here are just giving us a little bit of a clue as to where people might be moving to get to other communities and settlement areas. It's very high level, and as we work through the system, some of that actually does alter a little bit. Then we move on a little bit in more detail into each settlement area. And we had received a very long list of possible destinations for all of the settlement areas. So we go through each settlement area and at, again, a very high level, understand where each of these destinations might be. We also have them classified into civic destinations, historical, architectural destinations, recreational, natural heritage, cultural and institutional destinations, and information centers and kiosks. Opportunities for new signs. We have many signs existing already, but as we're working through a strategy, we might have some opportunities for new things and new purpose for signs. So encouraging civic pride and enhancing the public realm. We're really showing an out-facing to the public that you're proud of these destinations and you are inviting people to come and visit those places. Improve on scale and placement to support more users. Well, we're trying to make those signs and the messaging accessible to people so that they can see clearly and understand those signs and see them. Improve consistency to support users. We're maintaining a certain standard from community to community, and consolidating efforts. Consider branding and support sense of place. Well, we've got 5 players here. We've got the overall county and then our 4 individual township municipalities as well. Prioritizing information, again, which pieces of information are important to understand as one moves through the community. We want to hit the higher priorities first, and then as we move down through the system to the smaller destinations or those that might have a lesser tourism attraction appeal, they would end up at a lower, smaller priority. Highlight and promote tourism efforts. Well, this is a key piece to the whole system. We're really trying to showcase Haliburton as a whole. So that is one of the overlying concepts for moving forward. Our foundation's research development, we've got a framework that we've put together, looking at best practices, reviewing your existing sign inventory, analyzing it, looking at your engagement results. So we've done that and consolidated that as a first phase in our report. So what we heard from our stakeholder group, we interviewed members from each municipality township with a cross-section of different government service levels and public interest. So it was just a very comprehensive group, a little from each to cover everything. So some unique situations were found from those interviews. We have a better understanding of that boundary case in Dorset between Lake of Bays and Algonquin. Gas stations, there are some places where this is the last gas station before you head on out, so it might be important to help your visitors with identifying that. Boat launches, wow, I don't know that I've come across a county with as many boat launches as you have there. They are here, there, and everywhere, so that is going to be a little bit of a challenge. Geocaching, capital of the world. So that is very exciting. And how can we incorporate that into our system? So those were 4 things amongst many, but just highlighting those 4 for now. Things to be prioritized that we had learned also: significant tourist destinations and attractions were to be prioritized, as well as municipal sites, services, and amenities. Things that we might consider also would be the not-for-profit organizations that have destination appeal, and private businesses. Specific accommodations can be considered. We're thinking about how we could incorporate or use that as a pay-to-play system. Basically, wayfinding signage that supports tourism and promotes exploration and travel throughout the county would be the most helpful and be a mainstay of the strategy. And we did identify through that focus group various tourist attractions, scenic locations, and recreational assets that will be included in the strategy. So in the works, how are we connecting the county of Haliburton? So with this wayfinding strategy, branding is a main strategy to maintain consistency in the style and design of our signs, so that the branding flows through. And this isn't just the physical design. This also has to do with linking with other information sources, such as your websites and printed materials and whatnot, so that thread, that branding, is always part of the sales pitch, really, between boundaries. So you've got county boundaries, you've got MTO jurisdictions, which are really a very big player in your county. You've got your municipalities, townships, zones, and various districts as well. Between travel modes, this isn't all about vehicular travel and navigation, but it's also from your vehicular to your pedestrian use, with consideration also of cycling and boating and whatnot. So if you're cycling, when do you know you're in one county versus another? Or where do we have those trailheads, directing people to those trailheads or those boat launches, and so on and so forth. Sign design considerations. We've got our different sign types to suit different needs. We have our MTO guidelines. So any signage happening on an MTO corridor needs to follow the MTO guidelines. So really it's about, there really isn't too much wiggle room in those MTO guidelines, but the connectivity with those signs that might happen on those roads is the important factor. AOAD guidelines we need to follow so that everyone can understand your signs. And then we want consistency in branding and specific identity within that family. So theming and inspiration, we look at, well, what is Haliburton County all about? We've just put together an assortment of things that speak to Haliburton. So it really is about landscape, natural resources, you've got a really beautiful county made up of forests and lakes and rivers to be enjoyed by all. So we've then moved forward with this theming and inspiration to come up with a couple of concepts. And these are concepts in the works. So we've come up with two overall concepts that, of course, both would require further work in detail, but we'd like to narrow it down before moving forward. So there will be some conversation post this review to choose one of these concepts to further develop. So the first one here is our timber concept. So playing on wood fabrication and different techniques for joining and whatnot, very much a theme based on post and rail design. So really developing our post systems and including a black or steel member. I'm not sure exactly at this point what that might be. It could be steel, it could be something that's painted black, it could be a composite material, but it essentially is part of that overall structural component of each of the signs in combination with our wood members. Subtle detailing, the chamfering of the post tops and smaller bolts and whatnot would round out the system. The actual panels themselves, dark blue panels with high contrasting white lettering. And then we're including our Haliburton Highlands branding through the green and blue and the Haliburton logo, I should say, including that in all of the panels at some point. We are also offering opportunity for highlighting what township you're in with these signs as well. So we're acknowledging each of those 4 communities as well. In this scheme, we're just for topic of discussion at some point, whether we use the Haliburton County logo, which is a little slighter in the gateway signs, or we could also, as an alternative, use the Haliburton Highlands logo as the overriding theme. This tends to be a way of the future in terms of showcasing a community, in terms of a tourism strategy. We're finding in our work that the crest is becoming a little not used as much in gateway signs, largely due to legibility and whatnot. So anyway, that would be the first concept. The second concept we have is similar to timber, but it's forest, so a little bit more of a natural theme here, picking up on our hardwood, softwood forests, and using the silhouette of those features in our signs. We're using it in a few different ways. We could use it, use it as a backdrop, perhaps. Mostly it is actually used as a backdrop. It could be something that's a shadow image on some timber wood, as we see here in our first gateway sign. Or it could be on a panel as the backdrop panel with add-on pieces. So in this third sign here, we would have separate panels attached to a main panel. So there would be some flexibility there. And when those, if there were only 1 or 2, we would still have a bit of a backdrop showing, so it wouldn't be a blank panel. So that's an interesting treatment as well. Here we're also showcasing 2 different ways of County of Haliburton highlights, straying from the Haliburton County logo on the first one, and then being true to the Haliburton County on the second one, and using the Haliburton Highlights tagline at the bottom. Maybe these are a little bit of extra information, but nevertheless, still part of this overall system using the forest. We're still including the township label at the top. We're using the township label, or names, I should say, versus logos, just for identifiability. People can read those a little easier. They're easier to understand as one drives by rather than just the logo. In the works, sign location plans. So here we actually identify specifically where our signs are going. They're numbered, and they then refer to our messaging charts. So each sign has a number, a sign type assigned to it, and what is actually happening on that sign panel. In the works still is budgeting, and of course this is very fluid at the moment based on all of those different signs. But where we are at the moment in the report, we have these broken down in much more detail. But for the purpose of this presentation, we have our county gateways. We've identified approximately 17 at a total of approximately, again, because we have no design specifically identified. So we're using averages from the past, best case scenario anyway from previous works. So county gateways, 146. Primary settlement areas, we so far have gone through Haliburton, Dorset, Minden, and Wilberforce and come up with a total of 318,500 and 64 signs for our secondary settlement areas for 224. So our very preliminary subtotal is 688,000. Phased over 5 years. We've seen some communities will bite the bullet and do everything at once. And then most communities will phase it over a few years based on their priorities, available budgets, what they're able to do. Anywhere from 3 to 6 years is very, very standard. And phasing can be, different priorities can be anywhere from looking after problem areas. Maybe those are the areas that you start off in phase 1. Maybe it could be fixing signs currently that you have that are in need of repair. Lots of different reasons for priorities and ways that you can spread that over a few years. So it's still in the works. Once we come up with a final design, we would come up with design intent drawings to accurately reflect our design intent. We'd come up with some phasing recommendations, as I said, management of the strategy, who's looking after the strategy, how are they going to do it, and then installation considerations. How do you go about putting this out to contractors? What's their responsibility? What are your responsibilities for the signs, and so on? So that wraps up where we're at right now. We've got a little bit left to go, and we're quite excited about where the concepts are going to be going. This all comes together. So thank you very much. I believe Scott has some things to add on.
Good morning, Mr. Robel. Before we go to questions or comments, we'll hear your comments that you've got to.
Good morning, Warden and members of council. Excuse me. So a lot of information. Apologies. A lot of information in front of you in that foundations report in the presentation. Just a couple points I'd like to emphasize. Right now, we're viewing this as a plan that the new Municipal Services Corporation that would receive the county's portion of the municipal accommodation tax. In the briefing note I sent to you, and I highlighted that organization would do a lot of the heavy lifting, both from management of the contracts, implementation of the strategy, and ultimately the financial burden of implementing this program. It's a great use of that funds or those funds. At this point, we don't plan showing up or coming to the member municipalities at a later date saying, can we get additional funds from you to lead or finance a strategy. We don't anticipate, again, going to the ratepayers or requesting from this council that, any budgetary increases coming off the levy. It would be solely funded through the accommodation tax. And as Station noted, this is really probably a 3 to 6 to 7 year program to implement. We view next year as probably really trying to operationalize it, wrap our heads around the strategy, and then we would look at in 2026 probably ultimately putting signs in the ground. That would be subject to the MAT funds being available to us, and we think given a full budgetary cycle, that'll give us a really good idea of potentially how much money we can collect in a given year over that program. And then allow us to start actually saying this is how much it's going to cost us, and this is how long it's going to take us, so that we're fiscally prudent with the response or the implementation. And then ultimately as well, we would be looking at probably setting aside annually some money from the MAP funds just from in a reserve to manage repair and fixing some of the wayfinding. So I know on the surface it looks like a big number, but I do just want to stress we really view this as coming through the accommodation tax fund and not being funded through the ratepayers, whether that be at the county or at the local level. Ultimately, if your councils want to expedite a process, we would gladly have a conversation about that if you wanted to match some dollars or things like that. But at this point, we're not asking you to approve the strategy or approve funds for it. We're just looking for input on what we've included as far as what's going on the signs and the design concepts. So thank you.
Thank you. So comments or questions? Councillor Fury.
Yes, this RFP, is it all encompassing? Is this going to run on for a while here? Or is there a clause that they get extras here?
Through you, Worden. So Plural really just looks at the strategy and the design of the strategy. When we actually tendered the contract, there's other agencies or corporations that would actually do the physical design and then implementation of the strategy. So the next steps for Plural would be we would be taking this report and strategy or draft strategy to the member municipalities for additional
open-ended.
Well, I think in the briefing note, I noted we would hope to have the strategy adopted by the end of this year. And then we would have to subsequently do a separate RFP to actually tender the physical design and implementation of the installation.
And it's going to come out of the MAT tax if we have that much MAT.
Correct. I don't view this at this time of coming to county council and actually requesting that we increase.
Okay, I have some questions. I look at the bill here and it's 688,000. Does anybody realize that we're in a recession? Building permits in Barrie are down for housing at 40-some%. Dysert's down 60%. You may look at your building permits and say, oh boy, the numbers are there, but the numbers are not there for $1 million cottages. They're there for decks, they're there for garages. The construction industry is in trouble here. And it is the industry that drives the economy in Haliburton County. Make no about it. With the sub-trades and the trades, they're the ones that pay the wages and they're the ones that create the jobs. And I'm telling you, I've talked to a number of contractors. They're working on last year's projects. They have no big projects even being asked for. Guys, the county gets its money from the municipalities who get the growth. Whether we like it or not, some of these things are nice to do, but are they necessary? That's my point. I think this is a great thing to do, but I'm just not sure that until we see some money coming from the MAT tax and we pass this out to townships to look at that, and who maintains these signs after the wing of the snowplow knocks them over? I guess they're going to be off the road far enough. I'm not sure, but there is maintenance. There's staff time here. There's a lot of things that we don't know. So I'm not. I'm for the program, but I'm certainly not for any expediting it. I want to make sure I see where the money's coming from.
I believe our CAO would like to respond to that.
Thank you, Worden, through you to Councillor Fury. Your point's very well taken, Councillor, and that's when Mr. Ovell made the comment. Is we're not asking county council to dedicate any tax-based supported money to this. It's purely through the MAT tax for considerations council as we go forward with it. So taking into account all the things you mentioned, but I think it's important. It's a high value project for the municipality, but again, recognizing that we're going to leverage the MAT tax to pay for it versus going to the ratepayers.
I'd like to say too that we have a full-time staff and a tourist information booth telling people where to go and where to travel. And I think some of the rest of these tourist information booths. And we have a Chamber of Commerce. And we spent, I don't know how many $1,000s on a 911 thing. And I don't hear complaints now that they're going down logging roads anymore. They're finding their way. So I think it's a good thing, but I don't think it's in the necessary category.
Other comments or questions? Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I think I guess one of the things on this whole new corporation is I don't really quite understand how it's practically going to be fitting into the county in terms of, budgets and, how does the money flow and so on. So, I don't like to spend money that I don't have yet. And so I'm almost wondering if this is premature to be, I don't really know exactly what you are asking. We're talking about, just talking about things in general. Yes, and in general, it's great. But as Councillor Ferry says, it certainly is in the nice to have category. The other things about this, the MAT tax is, what are the other competing projects for those dollars? And how much are those dollars going to be? So that's my concern about, pushing too far forward on this, is that trying to understand how it all is going to work, because it's an awful lot of money.
Thank
Mr.
you,
CAO.
Warden Ambassador, Councillor Carter. I think, again, your points are all well taken. I think there's a reason it was brought forward in the fashion it was, is the fact is if you can, an analogy would be like, we're pre-planning for something. We have an opportunity to pre-plan for something, and it's going to sit there. And when we are ready to move forward with it, we have design, we have agreement on location, like the strategy is actually sitting there waiting to be used. And 100% to your point with respect to the municipal corporation that's going to be administering the portion of the MAT tax and where it goes, that's another level of consideration before anything goes forward. And that's why it's being brought forward for information for council right now, for input from the member municipalities, so that we have a program. I think it's a significant value added program for the county that's ready to go when and if the member municipalities in the county deem it to be warranted at that time. So that's like, and so it's a really good program to put in place, tagged for consideration under the MAT tax funding, but not saying, making it dedicated to MAT tax funding, saying you have to spend it there. So to your point, it is more about the general acceptance of the program, the design elements of the program. So when and if we're ready to move forward with it, it is turnkey almost. We're going, okay, here's where we're going to go, and we can jump right into the program without going through design, relocation, all thing again at that time. But yeah, we're not asking for any pre-approval on the allocation of money at this time.
Councillor Dayu.
Thank you. I hear what my fellow councillor members are saying, and I would struggle a lot more if this were not coming from the MAT tax, if it were just coming from our general tax base, but it is coming from MAT tax, which has a restricted amount of things that we can do in terms of criteria. So honoring that, I do want to make a couple of comments about the report, about the presentation, and of course the lengthier report in our agenda package. I think the work done thus far is excellent. I really appreciate the concepts that have been presented. I am strongly in favor of concept number 1, which is bold and clear, and the simplicity of the colors allows for the timber frame architecture around the signs to be shown off more. I think it's really beautiful work, and I think if council decides to go ahead with this in years to come, based on what we learned from the MAT tax, etc., the work done this far is going to put us into a really good spot for that. The question I have, I suppose, is, and I probably know the answer to this, regarding the list of selected locations for these signs. I think it starts on page 50 in the report. Presumably, our local councils will have a chance to fine tune that list, add a couple things that we think should be there, even if they didn't quite hit the criteria, or knock some things off. Is that right? We would have final say?
Absolutely. Do you hear me? Am I there?
Yeah, we
Yes,
can hear
very
you.
good. Okay, absolutely. That list is still open for massaging, and with so many destinations at play, and we're sitting on one side of the fence here, trying to prioritize and whatnot. But we'll be giving you the tools on how to, when the time comes. When the time comes, this is folding out potentially in a number of years, and that list may change a little bit. So when you're actually putting them in the ground, one needs to make sure that those destinations are still relevant, that there may be some new destinations. So how do you adjust those messaging charts to suit? So we'll give you the tools on how to do that.
Councillor Rael?
I'm hearing what everybody is saying, and I gotta be honest, I'm absolutely in favor of a concept, period. Okay, there's no room for doubt in my mind that this is a direction that we need to go. What we're debating is how much it's gonna cost today, where we're gonna go today, blah, blah, blah. I think we're getting so deep into the weeds that we're gonna lose the whole concept of what we're trying to do here today. Is just get the concept accepted as a direction that could be done. The overview, I don't know how the rest of you have, but when we've applied for grants, you gotta be ready to shovel. And if you don't even know where you're going or what you're doing, it's gonna make it very difficult for us to look at money for this. If a separate corporation is going to be dealing with it, and they're gonna be using their MAT tax as a seed, that's wonderful. But no matter how much we collect in MAT tax, we're gonna need additional money from somewhere. And if we can show that there is a program, especially if that program has already been partly developed, it's easier to go from a trot to a gallop than it is to go from dead stop. Because I think that's kind of sort of where we are. My question would be more so related to some of the problems that I've seen with regards to the overall design of the signs. In the east side of Haliburton County, when you come up 62 into Bancroft, you see like a lot of information. We can debate whether that's the right style, whether it's the right information, but it tells you what you can do. The nice part of it is you come to a stop. You have to stop in order to turn the corner. Move now from there to 118 coming in front of Wilberforce, and look at what you face when you come there. It is a maze of, I'm not sure what, and I'm sure there are other intersections like that. This is where I think the kind of stuff that we're talking about here today would have value. When you come to the hall, come to the corner to make the turn, either to go into Wilberforce or to go into the rest of it. And we could probably say the same thing at Torrey Hill too, but that stop is going to be when you get to that. When we have approached the MTO and stuff like that, it's like pulling teeth. So my question would be around the idea of in the two concepts that you've had for the signage, is there something there that in any intersection like the one I mentioned at Wilberforce, there's probably many others that would do that the MTO would be able to say, yeah, we can go with that. If we don't know today, I strongly recommend that that's something that in the interim period we find out, because those are the kind of areas where we're going to get a better bang for the buck. When the guy's coming to a stop, they got time to read the sign and they can do good things. So just my thoughts.
Thank you. Councillor McKechnie?
Needless to say, I'm going to give my opinion. And to me, I think, it's great. It'd be great to have. But this is 2024. We better get our heads out of the clouds as far as I'm concerned in regard to if we have $700,000 to divide up into great projects around our community. I know Dysart, we've got some major infrastructure problems coming. I'm sure we all do. And I mean, our healthcare system. I said infrastructure, our youth. I mean, that's a lot of money today. People are struggling out there. Like, I don't think myself personally, and I'll defend this to any of my constituents, I wouldn't be representing my constituents if I was, going to be saying, write the check tomorrow. This is the tough times we're in here right now. And we got to just, to me, we got to pull back. And it's great to have this in order, ready to go. I agree. But right now, it's farthest thing in my mind. It's not a priority at all. So I'm sorry to put that spin on it, but that's where my heart is and that's how I feel. This is not a priority. Not the, you're trying to tell me I can't get in my car today and punch in an address and it's not going to take me there? Thank you.
Councillor Burton and Councillor Fury.
Thank you, Warden. I just like to say as well that the concept I think is fine. I do have problems, much like Councillor Carter. I'm not sure about the MAT tax spending, or I hate spending money we don't have. Another concern I do have is the maintenance, which has been mentioned, but I have some signs, for example, out in Highlands East that were put up on a project a few years ago, and they're in disrepair now, and it's probably been 15 years or so, and I'm not sure who's going to take them over and fix them, but you know, that's out there as well. But like I said, the concept is fine. I'm not sure if the timing's right. You know, we've put a lot of time and effort into our website, the county website, and the different websites we have in the municipality, and you know, we were checking the numbers. They are high, that people are checking in, seeing what is going on in the community. But I just think the timing is not right.
Councillor Fury, then I might have a few.
Well, I
comments.
think Councillor Riel's right. We can adopt the thing in principle and to move forward somehow. But when I was here 4 or 5 years ago, which is not that far, we were struggling with the county tree sign bylaw. Did we ever resolve that? There was a big discussion. We couldn't agree at that council on how were the county was, will they need approval on all these highways? I assume they will. The county bylaw will kick in.
Yeah, I mean, any approvals required on
Yeah.
the implementation phase,
Yeah.
that would all be mapped out as part of the implementation phase.
Okay, and that
Any
would be
permitting
included in a
with
county bylaw.
MTO, that would all be part of the.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it is part of the county bylaw.
I just, I'm in agreement with much of what Councillor Rial had to say about the, you know, this is something that we do and will need going forward. This is a long-term plan. And I think that, you know, taking into like full understanding of what Councillor McKechnie is saying about where our priorities lie. The thing about MAT tax is that it's very definite about how that money would be spent. This is a concept we're developing for a future, you know, I want to say installation is not the right word, but going forward in the future, and there's no defined period of time within it which it must be done. But MAT tax has got to be spent, our portion of it, on tourism. It can't be spent on you know, some of those other things that we know are priorities. At any rate, I have some questions about, one of the questions was how we know the challenges, as you mentioned, Councillor Rial, with MTO and signage. I'm assuming that there will be a process that will kind of streamline and we'll have approvals in place for this project with MTO so that we don't have problems. And, you know, I mean, obviously it's been done in other municipalities, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Through your Warden, yeah, that would be part of the implementation phase and the tendering of the RFP. That would all have to be kind of agreed upon with the MTO. There'd be conversations, particularly around those larger gateway signs in particular. And just a follow up, I do recognize, and this project it's a nice to have, not need to have. Ideally, that's why, you know, recommending using the MAT funds for it. If I was providing a presentation today requesting 650 grand, I'd probably be a lot more uncomfortable sitting here than I currently am. But so again, we view it as something that when it's adopted, it would be in place, and then we would need to operationalize it over a period of time. And that funding, there will be competing issues from that municipal services corporation. It's not like we're just going to say, you know, here's, you know, we collected $100,000 last year, we're going to spend it all on signage. That might not be the case. You know, that ultimately that board would help allocate those funds with input from county council. So just to provide a little bit of context with that. And again, with the MTO, there can be a challenging organization to deal with. And those will be part of the conversations we have with Stacia and her team moving forward, is identifying what the best practices are in other jurisdictions to help us make sure that process is streamlined and efficient.
With respect to comments that Councillor Dayu has made, it's interesting, I kind of struggled with the different designs that have been presented. I like them both. I sort of tended towards the forest design, but I also have another design in mind. I've always been very impressed with, I think it's the county of Peterborough with the stonework and the geese flying. Maybe we could do something similar to that with herons or something. There are other thoughts about design for gateway signage that I'm wondering if we can't consider. As to questions, I'm wondering about the process of prioritizing. You had said that at some point, given the long list of locations, there has to be some form of prioritization. I'm assuming that the lower tiers would have some involvement in that. But what is your vision on how those would be prioritized?
Really, destinations are prioritized within each community. And so as one is entering a settlement area, usually it would be the destinations that have the highest appeal for tourism. It's the tourists, usually your visitors and guests, that are perhaps unaware of really where they're going, and having that extra sign there to direct them. So places that might attract more people would be of the higher priority.
Who
and then
decides that?
that's a decision. We've got a few criteria, and then we would work with your team to figure that out. You'll have a better idea, obviously, of what your priority might be than we do. We've just got the background, the experience to suggest, but we would help with that decision.
I also note, under when it comes to secondary areas, that there would be several secondary areas within the Algonquin Highlands Township that need to be discussed.
Sure.
And one particular point about the major nodes that you've identified.
Yes.
Although it is outside of the county of Haliburton, the intersection of Highway 35 and 60
Okay.
is a primary point that directs people to Oxton Lake, which is one of our key communities.
Yes.
And even though that intersection is outside of Haliburton County, it would seem to me a key addition that would need to be made to direct people to the remainder of the northern part of the county.
Perfect.
I think we just need to stress the fact that this is a concept that we're looking at right now, that it's a long-term project, and that there are a number of decisions and discussions that need to be made. We do have a contract in place to work on this. So, I hope that there's not too much negativity about how we go forward with the project. I would look for any other questions or comments. I think today that we're really just receiving the report rather than making any key decisions. Any other comments or questions? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillors Royale and Shell.
Be resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the county wayfinding strategy presentation and related report from Stacia Stemski of Plural.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks ever so much, Stacia.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. I think we will take a 10-minute break and then move into the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. So on June 6, 2024, Bill 185, the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, received royal assent. This report is provided for, the staff report is provided for informational purposes to outline the changes that occurred to both the Planning Act and Development Charges Act through Bill 185. While the explanation of the changes in the report is quite lengthy, the following are some brief highlights of the that are most impactful to current county processes. Firstly, there were changes to third-party appeal rights. Previous legislation introduced the concept of a specified person and associated list of who counts as such. Bill 185 limits who can appeal official plans and official plan amendments to the applicant, the municipal authority, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, a specified person, or specifically for official plans, the registered owner of any land to which an official plan would apply. In doing so, the province eliminates third-party appeals by neighboring landowners, ratepayers, and other members of the public for these Planning Act applications. While consent applications had limitations to appeals established previously, the limitations have now expanded to most county approval processes. With respect to pre-consultation requirements, recent years have seen many municipalities pass bylaws requiring pre-consultation processes to occur prior to the submission of a formal Planning Act application. Bill 185 removes the county's ability to require a pre-consultation process for official plan amendments and draft plans of subdivision. Instead, the Planning Act has been amended to simply permit applicants to seek a pre-consultation with staff if they desire. The applicant can now, the applicant can now seek a motion before the Ontario Land Tribunal at any time after a pre-consultation has occurred or after application fees have been paid, rather than after a formal application submission has been made and the clock on that application for a decision, has run out. While we anticipate many consultants or individuals will continue to seek comments ahead of submission of a formal application, we will need to ensure through thorough and prompt review of application packages upon their submission to ensure everything has been addressed to not get into trouble with those appeal abilities now. And lastly, the inclusion of use it or lose it language into draft approvals of subdivision. Bill 185 expands on the existing municipal authority to attach lapsing provisions to approve site plans and draft plans of subdivision. While imposing this type of quote, use it or lose it tool would be new for site plan approvals, the change for draft plan of subdivision approvals is that it's now mandatory, whereas before it was at the municipality's discretion. This not only pertains to new applications, but also by 2027, the Act requires municipalities to implement lapsing provisions on existing draft approvals. So our really historic draft plans of subdivision by 2027 will also have lapsing provisions included in them. As noted, there are numerous changes highlighted in the report, but the three discussed are likely the most impactful to the county. But if council has any questions about any of the changes outlined in the report in its totality, I'd be happy to answer at this time. Thank you.
Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Councillors Fury and Burton, thank you. My apologies. So that was moved by Councillors Fury and Burton to receive the report.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives planning report PLN 12/2024 entitled Bill 185 Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your planning department update.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. At this time, I have nothing specific to highlight from the report. However, if council has any questions about its contents, I'd be happy to answer at this time.
Any questions on the planning department update? Councillor Carter.
Just on the LiDAR. So, you know, there was the presentations that were made, there were comments that, you know, came back and so on. Can you tell me sort of where that process has evolved since that time?
Yes, through you, Warden. So this predates me, but I believe in January, public meetings were held about the draft mapping. Since that time, our partners in the project have been working on finalizing the mapping, satisfying the requirements of the funding uh, stipulations. So the data has to be public and all those good things. So once Ganaraska has it in a pretty little package, we will be taking it on. We'll be the hosts of it, and we'll be creating mapping, digital mapping, sort of like our web map that has the LiDAR on it. We'll be providing how-tos um, and providing information on how it's applicable, how to use the data, how to read it as municipal employees when reviewing, in particular, planning applications for floodplain constraints and that kind of information. So right now, we're just essentially in that data transfer process of taking the information that Ganaraska has created, putting it into our system, making it usable, and then we will be releasing it and rolling it out with how-to sessions and information.
Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
And so will it then become the official document in terms of, to be used by planning and by building departments and so on, in terms of floodplain?
Through you, Warden. In the mid to longer term, we anticipate incorporating the very specific floodplain data that comes with LiDAR into the county's official plan. In the meantime, though, it is best practice for municipalities that have this detailed mapping to utilize it in terms of planning applications, just given that human habitation in floodplains is a matter of public safety, health and safety. So even though it won't be embedded immediately in policy, it is the best and newest information that's available to staff to use in order to determine if there's any potential impacts to human activity in association with the floodplain. So we do anticipate using it as soon as it's publicly available for that purpose.
It was my understanding, I think referring to your initial question, Councillor Carter, that there were some concerns raised some months ago about its ease of use. And I think, I'm just hoping that those concerns have been addressed moving forward. Absolutely. Morning, Mr. March.
Good morning. So in the gap between the previous planner leaving and before the current planner arrived, I had been doing some work with Ganaraska, mainly from the tech side of things in terms of the LiDAR web mapping as such. But I did recall the conversation we had at a previous council meeting about there being some questions and concerns about usability and some other things in terms of the LiDAR web map that Ganaraska built and is currently available on the Ganaraska site. From what I understand, talking to the gentleman who's kind of running the project from Ganaraska, he's reached out. They've incorporated a lot of that feedback. Some stuff they can, some stuff they can't implement. But they were waiting for the new planner to come on board, and I think we need to make a connection with them because they wanted to release, I guess, a series of FAQs and maybe even kind of a response in terms of here are the questions we got, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do based on the technology that we have. So I do know as well that they want to come and do a report to county council at some point. Just need to work out with Ms. Purcell about when that can best happen.
Councillor Ryall.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should have the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I've been known to forget a lot of stuff. When it comes to GIS levels and the concept of identifying wetlands, EP type environments, log type stuff, the average public, someone who is now either interested in building on a specific tract of property or is interested in getting a particular tract of property, do they have readily access to that information or that particular layer at this point? So if they're looking to build a building and then they go to the lot and find out it's 80% EP or wetland or whatever, is that currently available, or if it's not, is it on the radar to come in what period of time?
Through you, Warden, wetlands and environmental constraints such as that are already located on our county web map. So you can easily see it. It's also in the schedules of the county's official plan. So any natural constraints that are identified by the province, which wetlands are already embedded in our mapping. So when you look on the county's web map, you will see very distinct wetland features in different typologies on the map, depending on what it is. And it's very apparent when something is intervening on a property such as that. So in terms of zoning, the web map doesn't currently have the township zoning bylaws on it. But that information is also available publicly to anyone looking for it from the townships.
Go ahead.
Is that tied to the overall county map, or can it be tied to a specific tract of land? If I know what my particular tract of land that I want to talk about, can I actually see it and say, okay, yeah, okay, that whole section there can't be used or has limited use without going into the entire map of Haliburton County?
Through you, Warden Danielson, you can search for your specific property on the web map, and it does have the property boundaries for all properties in Haliburton. And within that, the delineated property boundaries, you'll be able to see what is happening on your property, depending on what layers you choose to show as visible in the left side repository. So yeah, it's readily available. It's quite easy to use. You can search for your address. It zooms right into that. You don't have to go searching around if you don't want to. And anything that we have publicly available for mapping is on the web map for the public to see.
Any other questions? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the planning department update? Councilors Royale and McKechnie.
Be resolved, Haliburton County Council receives plan report PLN 14/2024 entitled Planning Department Update for July 2024 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next are our administration reports. Good morning.
Good morning, Warden and Council.
So the first item is the Canada Community Building Fund Agreement renewal.
Yes, our current Canada Community Building Fund funding agreement expired on March 31st of this year. This funding was the funding formerly known as the federal gas tax funding. Our staff received our updated municipal funding agreement from AMO mid-June, and the new agreement covers a 10-year term up to March 31st, 2034. There is one major change to the municipal funding agreements. However, it doesn't affect the county. That change is there is now a requirement for single or lower tier municipalities with a 2021 census population of 30,000 or more to conduct a housing needs assessment. So the county does not qualify to have to meet that requirement. We have been provided our funding amounts up to 2028 with the new agreement, which I've outlined in my report. We will get the remainder 5 years after the 2026 census. Staff are recommending the new municipal funding agreement be executed by bylaw as requested by AMO.
Questions? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and authorize signing? Councilors Carter and Fury.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives report COR 22/2024, and that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute the municipal funding agreement for the Canada Community Building Fund for the period of 2024 to 2034.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is a report on physician and nurse practitioner recruitment.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of County Council. I bring before you today reports that were requested at last month's meeting regarding adding a signing bonus for physician recruitment and also about nurse practitioners. So firstly, in staff research, we did not discover any communities that are paying an additional amount, a financial amount that's released at the time of signing a return of service agreement. So nothing that's over and above their annual or bulk payment. My recommendations, based on the research that I've done and also comments from physician candidates and medical residents, et cetera, is that we don't increase our don't offer an additional amount of incentive. What Haliburton already has in place is quite generous compared to the other communities, and I don't think adding an additional amount will make any difference. What I would recommend is we work on more community support or a community care kind of package involving more partners within the community. I'm also recommending that we prorate our incentives for physicians who offer to practice less than full-time hours with a 2-year commitment. So that would be if someone came in and offered to work part-time or 3/4 time, let's say. In regarding nurse practitioner research, I did discover that there's a federal incentive program as well as a provincial program. There is one community that I discovered that is offering an additional incentive for nurse practitioners, and they have been successful recruiting 2 of them. As far as what's happening locally, both the medical center and the hospital are kind of in flux right now, reevaluating their needs, waiting for funding to come into play for nurse practitioners. The hospital does have a temporary full-time posting for a nurse practitioner, and the clinic they are open to hiring more, just waiting for funding to be in place. So based on this research, my recommendation would be to create an incentive package for a nurse practitioner similar to what has been done in our neighboring city, and to actively promote the federal and provincial programs on our website, just so you know they are aware when they're looking. I welcome any of your comments or questions.
Thank you for your research on this and a short turnaround. Questions or comments? Councillor Carter?
Yeah, I think as far as the physicians are concerned, I mean, you're dead right. It's, I've talked to a couple of ones that have come through in the last few months, and, it's not the money. That's not the issue. So keeping it, as we see in the comparison, we already are higher than most of the other areas. So that's, I think, the best we can do. In terms of the nurse practitioners, I'm against creating a program at this point until things are figured out. I'm a little concerned that I know that the family health team is struggled with the whole working with the government and figuring out how nurse practitioners can be integrated into the practice, and the provinces, I don't know the best words, dragged their feet on this. This has been going on for a couple of years. The hospital is the hospital, and this Kawartha North Family Health team that's running the urgent urgent care clinic here in Minden, I mean, that came from a special pool of money that the government created. There's no guarantee that the government's going to continue with that, you know, pool of money. So it's, you know, until the two governments can figure this out a little bit better, I don't think us creating a program is something that's prudent to do.
Comments from other members of council? Councillor Rail?
I guess with due respect, I just disagree. And the reason for that being that, again, you want to be able to know what you currently don't know in order to make a decent decision. And I think that in principle, I think we should be looking at some kind of a nurse practitioner program. Does that mean we have to approve it? That would be depending on what you came up with and the value of some of the challenges that Councillor Carter is saying. So in my particular case, I certainly would support further exploration to determine exactly what it would be that we would have to offer. And then again, looking into what Councillor Carter was just mentioning, how much of that would be a super deterrent versus an obstacle that we can get around or have to get around at some point.
Other comments or questions? I do like the fact that we have added more flexibility to what we're offering to physicians. I also believe that it would be beneficial to us to implement a program and for us to direct you to you know, come back with something more definitive for nurse practitioners if there's no uptake on that. You know, that we haven't lost anything, but you know, I do see us as being more proactive in looking at this as another alternative to try and help some of the shortages that we've got in Haliburton County. Any other comments or questions? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and to direct staff to work on including some recommendations for nurse practitioners? Councillors Shell and Dayu, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, all in favor? That's carried. Next is the municipal accommodation tax update.
Good morning
Good morning
again.
again.
Board and members of council. Just a report in front of you today, just to give you a brief update on where we're at in the process of establishing the Municipal Services Corporation to manage the county's portion of the municipal accommodation tax funds. There are just some provincial requirements that we're legally obligated to follow through on. So we are required to do some public consultation. In conversations with some of our legal representatives, there's no defined approach to that. They don't tell us what has to be included. So what we've done is we're hosting 3 public engagement sessions virtually. One's taking place actually this afternoon. We have about 10 or 11 people registered for that. We also do have a survey that's a really high level survey, just asking some probing questions on overall priorities for the organization. That data collected will at some point just be probably handed off to that new board, and they can, you know, as a point of reference. It's not really going to guide the overall strategy or objectives of that organization. We're also required to develop a business case. Once again, there's no defined requirements as to what has to be in that business case. Based on what I've seen in other communities, some agencies have gone as far out to get consultants. We're not or advising that. We are simply just going to do that internally, and really just has to define what the rationale as to why we're creating this separate entity. Contained within the report is a recommendation just on the board governance. We didn't do any public consultation related to that. After discussions internally, we felt that was a decision that best left at this table. So within that recommendation, we're identifying 4 council members. Those would be appointed by the member municipalities. And then we're recommending 3 members of the public beyond comprise the other components of the board. Really, the only consistency that we could identify was there's a mix of usually council representation and public representation, but board sizes vary. You know, and there's pros and cons with both of those sometimes. So what we've done is we tried to kind of land in the middle in the number of people on the board. And then I will bring a follow-up report back probably in late August or early September. That will just outline and detail the reporting relationship that would exist between county council and this new municipal services corporation, to make sure that you're all aware and understand how the decision-making process is going to work. I think Councillor Carter this morning was a great one, that we can detail that for you and reduce any confusion. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions you may have.
I'm particularly concerned or interested in the point about asset transfer policy. And you're suggesting that we have a number of, you know, that your department has a number of assets. Could you be a little more specific about that? Not giving away the rail trail or anything like that?
Apologies, Warden, that might be a typo in the report. Actually, we don't have a lot of assets. Like, our capital assets for our department are basically laptops. So it's again, it's just a requirement. Again, there's no defined approach as to what needs to be in that. We may have a few hoodies and some backpacks and things like that, but no, we're not giving away the rail trail on that. So, and apologize for that.
Any questions or comments about this particular report? Councillor Carter.
So, you know, like, as you said, you're gonna come forward with something that talks about the governance and so on. Are you getting input about that in these public consultations or?
Through you, Warden, we haven't. We, again, on the public consultation, it's really high level on, again, just some overarching priorities, objectives, using it as a bit of an opportunity as well to get some feedback on, you know, the existing priorities within our destination management plan. Had the discussion with the CAO as well as myself, and again, we felt that the conversations around the governance and the overall structure of that organization would be best left to the people at this table. And then perhaps in the new term of council, maybe once that board has kind of got its bearings and are functioning, you could have a different conversation about adjusting things. But for a period of time, particularly, we just recommended for the remainder of this term to try and keep it as simple as we can, to just get it up and running and get a feel for what can be done through that entity.
Go ahead, Councillor Carter.
And the second part is regarding the finances. Obviously, the revenues for this are the MAT tax. And, you know, perhaps there could be others at a future date. Are you going to track that sort of from each municipality sort of thing? So, you know, if we had a situation where one municipality was creating 60% of the revenue, you know, there's going to be the argument about, hey, how come these guys got a sign, or how come these guys got that when we're putting in most of the money? So,
through your word, that will be a challenge. It is one we'll just have to embrace. With that being said, how the relationship works and the bylaws are structured is STR hosts, I believe, remit every other month to Granicus. And then when those monies go into Granicus, they would then be transferred back to the townships. And then I believe how we would structure the service agreement between this entity and the townships, we would probably say once a quarter. Those funds would then be subsequently transferred into this entity. So it would be easy to monitor what townships or member municipalities are contributing. And then I think probably that service agreement, I shouldn't say probably, the service agreement will have an outline as to how we report to the member municipalities, and probably in those reports, whether it's biannually or annually, we could just kind of keep a detailed list and say, here's the revenue that's been collected and here's where it's been collected from.
it's sure to come up.
Councillor Royale.
Would it be pretty safe to say that, you know, we're gonna have the entity as a corporation, which to me is a great idea, at least we got a central thing, but we shouldn't be expecting a whole lot out of the corporation in 2025, other than getting themselves organized, getting a mandate under control, working out the details with the county and the 4 municipalities, and then finding out exactly who's who in the zoo. Does that sound about right?
Through you, Warden, had a conversation with our Director of Corporate Services about this a couple weeks ago. In 2025, again, my recommendation would be really probably fiscally conservative on budgeting any revenue coming in. And I would view that year as just basically the board kind of getting their feet wet and getting familiarized with existing research. I would think, this time next year, we're obviously, again, it would coincide with our budget planning, but we'd be developing an operational plan so that when 2026, we have a feeling for how much revenue is in place, what we can budget, and then subsequently that would be brought back to this table. Again, I'll outline that because the relationship, again, between this new entity and county council will detail in a further report, just so that reduce any confusion.
Any other questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Carter.
Just one more. I know it's, it may be premature, but I think it has to be into the thinking, is if, for instance, we decided that, the best use of the money is to, improve a road or something like that. That would mean the money would be spent by the county or the municipality. There has to be a way that we would have to figure out how monies are transferred back into the county or the municipalities to pay for a capital project, for instance.
Through you, Warden. So the legislation is pretty strict on the non-municipally retained. So I'd have to do a deep dive on it and get an opinion, but basically this entity would not be allowed to spend money on a capital roads project. That would be done at the local level. If you were looking at, say, the rail trail, and that would probably be better defined as a tourism asset or tourism infrastructure. And then once again, in the service agreement and in a perfect world, the service agreements are fairly consistent across the townships. Obviously, you'll have your priorities and may want to tweak them. So we could look at particularly just laying out the groundwork if there were joint projects. If you were approving a park or something like that, and a township wanted to come to this board, we just have to lay that out and then probably have some pretty standard kind of almost funding agreements, really, just to make it a straightforward process.
Just a comment from a CEO and then over to you, Councillor McKechnie.
Thank you, Warden Daniels. So further to Councillor Carter's comments, I think one of the things as we go forward, and Mr. Ovell talked about bringing a report back to council in the late August, early September, is the new corporation will be just that, will be incorporated body. So there'll be a series of documentation that will come before council, this council, as well as the lower tier councils, identifying authorities, processes, reporting, all those things will be put in place. So that will be clear definition and clear understanding as to who can do what without the approval of the other party. Similar to approvals of budgets, approval of work plans, those type of things. So all that will be threshed out before we get to Councillor Rael's point, before we get into the actual operational side of the corporation. So those things that Mr. Ovell and I've had a couple quick conversations on that. There's some really good examples across the province of highly functional municipal corporations that deal with multiple entities resourcing them. So I think that's what we're hoping to bring back to council in the fall for consideration.
Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, so are you saying that infrastructure wouldn't be a part of the tourism need?
Through you, Warden, infrastructure is a broad term. So what we've seen is this specific municipal services corporation, and I think Prince Edward County is a really good example where the tourism side, they haven't been utilizing that funding for like a capital roads project that could be used at your level. Again, it's the provincial legislation outlines that. I believe the terminology is it has to be used for the marketing, promotion, and development of tourism. Again, our economy is very closely linked to tourism. So that's a very broad term.
So
I-
So there's a clearly defined use of the money between the county and what the county can do with their portion of the funds and what municipalities can do with their portion of the funds. For instance, once the split has been made, the county is obligated to spend their money on tourism initiatives, whether it's marketing or you're actually putting money into something like the rail trail or any other tourism specific initiative. But the municipalities, 50% can be spent on whatever you want. That's my understanding on any infrastructure, anything within your budget that you decide you want to spend that money on. If I believe that's correct.
Yes, through your ward. And I think just for a local context, Prince Edward County is a really great example of that, where I think last year a big chunk of the municipally retained portion was spent, I believe, on roads and capital infrastructure projects to help kind of offset some of the budget pressures that we're seeing across the province.
One last comment. So you're saying that if a bridge is out on on a county road, I'm just using a real unrealistic scenario, but it could happen. We'd rather put the money into signs than fixing the bridge.
We'll have
Just-
Mr. CAO
Yeah,
respond to that.
thank you to Councilor McKechnie. It's about our, not our willingness, but our ability. So as Mr. Ovell's mentioned, so under the legislation, it splits the MAT tax in half. So the county gets a certain
I
portion
understand.
and there's only certain things we can spend money on, right? And bridges is not one of them unless we can directly tie it to the tourism side of it. However, at the local level, if it was on a municipal road, if that bridge were to go out, fully within the discretion of the local council to invest that their share of the MAT tax money in traditional, what I'm going to call traditional infrastructure. So it's a bit of the money's been split, one set of rules for us or the municipal corporation and one set of rules for the local municipality. So it's kind of a yes and no answer to your question.
Okay, I'm going to shut up here, but so what you're saying is that, and I understand it totally. I understand what you can do with your money and what we can do with our money. But to me, it's a priority. I mean, a bridge would be a priority on a county highway. I'll be quiet.
If I might, sorry, don't want to
Mhm, go ahead.
but I think Councillor McKechnie brings up a really good point. But by bringing in this money as, even though we're defined how we can spend it on the tourism side of things, that allows us to reprioritize the tax base supported money. So by bringing the MAT tax in, yes, it says we have to spend it on the tourism related pieces, but now that allows us to free up tax base supported money on, to your point, on the priority infrastructure projects, because we were able to deflect operating costs on the tourism side of things to a different revenue source. So it allows us to prioritize just in a different fashion, not using that MAT tax money, but using our tax base supported money.
Councillor Royale.
Not that we would want to do it, but having said that, staying in that same thought pattern. So for instance, let's say for the sake of argument that we believe it would make sense for us to work with the hatchery to increase our fish population in our lakes. Or to work with a snowmobile or an ATV association to look at a particular trail and say, whoa, this is getting to be dangerous and or doesn't meet the current demand. Is it theoretically possible for projects like that to be included in the county portion of the tax?
Through your ward, absolutely. That's all within the purview. It's as I alluded to in the wayfinding, it's some of those projects, the nice to have sometimes actually now become something that we can undertake. Because again, you're not taxing the ratepayer and you're not adding to the levy. So those kind of programs, and we would again just build those into the service agreements and things like that. And again, that just puts some parameters on it. In a perfect world, I would love if we could use some of the money for roads, but it's just that the province is fairly it has proven to be fairly strict around that.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I understand coming back in August, and I guess the example I used of roads was, you might have a road, improve the road near the whitewater canoeing so there's more parking or whatever it is. So, there's all sorts of things, but the rail trail is a better example. But think that when we come back in August or shortly thereafter, probably developing some FAQs or something, because it's hard enough for us to understand it, for the public to be able to understand it and to be transparent. It's probably worthwhile that we have something a document that's on the website that's easy for people to understand what's going on here, because there's going to be ins and outs and a lot of complexity.
And
Counselor Fury.
Well, I think this is all good news, because what I heard was that the mat tax money is going to the tourism department, and we could see some money freed up. So I'm expecting to see a lower budget on the tourism market.
That was misquoted, Councilor.
it-
Any other questions or comments? Could I have then a mover and a seconder to receive the mat tax report? Counselor Carter, Counselor Burton.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council approves staff report EDT 12/2024 municipal accommodation tax update.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir. Next up is Public Works. Morning, Sil.
Warden Danielson and members of council.
So your first item is the your status report.
Correct. Before you is our monthly status report. I have a few items of to note. Our County Road 503 hot mix project will probably be starting in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's good news. Our surface treatment and our roadside mowing are well underway, and I believe County Road 10 is the last to finish for our surface treatment for the county portion. So it's going really well. And our pavement markings are complete as well through the county. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions on the status report? Councilor Burton.
I just wondered, so if there's any information on when they're going to have Elephant Lake or County Road 10 finished?
Through you, Warden, it's should be done by the end of the week. I believe today they were finishing the top surface.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Carter.
I was just wondering, these digital radar signs that you have, and not an urgent thing, but I think it would be useful to get some feedback or some sort of report that basically says, what you're finding out in these places, because we do get an awful lot of complaints about speed and so on. And we are bringing these units into the municipal level also, but in general, it would be good to, I think, report on that, and I think the public would like to hear it too.
Through you, Warden Danielson, Public Works can provide a future report on this.
Any other comments or questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the status report? Councilors Fury and Dayu.
Be it resolved that the July 2024 status report on capital projects operations approvals and road maintenance be received for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the Hops Drive access to County Road 21 report. And I think first we'll hear from the CAO and then from Sil.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. This is a project that started quite a while ago I think it was in the previous term of council. But in the spring of this year, myself and Mr. Kluche were approached by Mayor Fury and Deputy Mayor McKechnie regarding concerns regarding the traffic safety or traffic impact of the proposed development. So you had a relatively low volume use property that was turning into a high volume use property with gas station, retail store, and food outlet. And in our digging, we went through, and there was I guess there was some miscommunication between the township and the municipality, and the county. There was a requirement for an entrance permit, and the conditions of the entrance permit actually were not followed through on. We have caught that now, but however, they're well into construction on the property. We've had some really good cooperation at that with the township, as well as through the owners of the property, and through with Sill's direction with respect to the engineering side of it. We're working now to, we've redesigned the entrances onto 21 to the point where we're maximizing traffic flow, improving public safety, but on more in the side standpoint, more from the broader concept, it will mitigate any potential negative impact on the businesses along that stretch. It's a very important commercial corridor going for the county and Dysart Township that will mitigate any concerns on that going forward. Sil can speak directly to the technical side of it, engineering, but from an operational side, this work is, we are hoping to proceed with this work. This time is the essence, because they're hoping to be, I believe it's Labor Day weekend-ish, they're hoping to be open. We need to move forward. It's an unbudgeted capital project within our system. However, in dealing with Ms. Robinson and Sil, is that we feel we can absorb the cost of this work within the current budget, and we'll reconcile that towards the end of the year and report back to council going forward. In discussions with Dysart, and this was discussed at their council meeting yesterday, is that we will adjust the capital program for 2025 to reconcile the fact that we're moving capital monies, unbudgeted capital monies into 2024 for Dysart and out of 2025. So we'll be bringing a report back to council in the coming months regarding the potential to advance the capital project of the new signalization at Industrial Drive and County Road 21 as a result of the new development on 21. So it's unusual the way it's being brought forward and being done, but I think it's essential both from an operational standpoint, public safety, and also to ensure mitigate any negative impact on the economics of County Road 21.
Anything you'd like to add to that? Sil?
Just to add that the new I provided attachment 2 as part of the report, and it has the top portion has the existing design. The lower portion will have the new proposed design, which will create an entrance for each of the development or the properties, relieving pressures to County Road 21 for accessing.
I understood the concept. I have to say, I did find the drawings a little bit difficult to follow. Questions or comments on this? Councillor Fury, then Councillor Carter.
Well, I'd just like to say that the ball got dropped here by both parties, but our planner did identify that there was some things required, and engineering approved it without getting those approvals. So county really dropped the ball here. Dysart should have noticed that too. I'm not taking any, I mean, we're responsible too, but I don't know how this happened. It just shouldn't have happened. It was an error. There's no question about it. It was an error.
On the part of both parties. Yeah. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I know this sounds trivial, but you're obviously going to block off some areas so that traffic flows in a certain manner in that area. You know, the areas that are then blocked off, it might be worthwhile not to fill them with grass, because the Dysart and Haliburton deer herd, I going by there last night, I saw like about 8 or 10 deer just right there on that. So they're just going to interfere with the whole process, and maybe making it a less palatable location for deer might be something to be considered in the plans.
Just on the, not specifically on the deer part of it, but the site plan is in the process of being amended, reflective of the new design and the new layout that will go before Dysart Council for final approval.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Councillors Carter and McKechnie.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council approves staff report PW 19-2024 Hops Drive access to County Road 21.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is the IT status report.
Hello
Mr.
again.
March.
So it's my standard IT status report, giving council a update on the projects and tasks that the team's currently working on. I don't think I have anything to bring to council's attention specifically, but as always, glad to answer any questions.
Any questions on the IT status report? Councillor Carter?
Um, you're saying in here, you're gonna try to expand the use of Teams.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, Councillor Carter, can't hear you.
He's going to expand the use of Teams. Uh, For whatever reason, and I can't put my thumb on it, Teams seems to take more bandwidth or something than Zoom. And I know that, living in an area that does not have terrific coverage, that I sometimes have more trouble with Teams than with Zoom. So I don't know if that is the case, or it's just, a very small study and just happenstance. But do you know if Teams does in fact take up more bandwidth?
Anecdotally, yes, from my experience and from what I've heard. I've never looked up or seen any stats on it,
Right.
but for sure, I've noticed it. Now, I will also say, we have, we do almost all Teams meetings internally. I don't think anybody uses Zoom anymore except for public meetings. And I don't recall, I don't even say I don't recall. We don't experience too many problems, and we have a lot of people working from home, and it hasn't been a big enough problem where it's come to our attention. So yeah, so if you have any specific issues,
I'm raising it to your attention.
and like I said, we'll keep it in mind, especially if we ever get to a point where we're looking at potentially running these meetings with Teams, then
Right.
a lot more testing and feedback will be gathered.
Okay.
But internally, it hasn't been an issue yet. That's made it to my knowledge, but I can always touch base with my frontline guys and see if they're hearing anything.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the IT report? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive, to approve? Councillors Burton and Carter.
Be it resolved, Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 2024 IT status report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next is the appointment to the health board, to the new health board. I gather you were going to speak to this item.
Yeah, good morning, Warden Danielson and members of Haliburton County Council. The CO received correspondence from the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit requesting County Council's appointment to the new Board of Health should the voluntary merger between the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit and the Peterborough Public Health Unit be approved. The purpose of the report this morning is to seek Council's appointment to that new board. And I would like to note for Council's interest this morning that the Clerk's Department has been contacted by the Health Unit, and Dr. Bocking is intending to, should the merger be approved, she has requested a delegation before Council at a September meeting. Thank you.
Well, it would be good to hear from Dr. Bocking and get an update. Meanwhile, with respect to the appointment from County Council, it's been my recommendation that given the work that Councillor Royale has been doing on the health board and bringing us, detailed reports and information, keeping us well up to date, that he be the appointment to the new board. That's most appropriate. So could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report and appoint Councillor Royale? Councillors Carter and Dayu. Thank you.
Be it resolved that report CLK 06-2024 be received, and Haliburton County Council appoints Councilor Royale as the representative to the new Board of Health should the voluntary merger of the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit and Peterborough Public Health Unit be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next item is a report from the CAO on integrated departmental work plans. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Warden Anderson. As part of our process going forward over the last number of months, we've now developed integrated work plans for all departments. And so basically what we're doing is tying in generally the work that's been implementation budget or previous plans approved by council going forward, but we've added a link to where they're actually been identified how they impact other departments going forward with respect to either from resources and financial resources or human resources needed to address them. These reports will now be used for the reporting that we do back to council. They'll be specific back because they're tied to the budget and other approvals of council. So as you receive your which we're recommending become bi-monthly reports from the departments, they will tie back to the work plan. So you'll actually have a progress metric showing the work being done on behalf of the organization as approved by council going forward. And once the strategic plan is approved by hopefully by shortly into 2025, the priorities and the objectives of the strategic plan will be built into the work plan. So you can see how the work of the strategic plan will be moved forward by staff as we go forward. And this will also allow us to help us with our budget monitoring and forecasting going forward. And they're not static documents, and they can be amended and adjusted as we go through the year, subject to approval of council were required or just information of council as we move forward.
Thank you. There's been a lot of work. This is a very detailed report and great information. I would look to members of council to ask any questions or make any comments. Councillor Carter.
Great, it's a great report. Just a couple little things. One, I think there's a typo on page 11 in that first paragraph, the end of the first paragraph. The other thing was on the page 19 on the actual budget, the actual versus budget. It might be worthwhile having another column of that could come from finance to basically check off if there's anything that is of concern, because it's always very difficult because of the way we spend money, right? That our money spend is seasonal, and when you look at just quarters, it you know, you can be 40% out, but because you didn't buy sand in July, sort of thing, you know, kind of thing. So it just might be helpful to have a line of noting what might be of concern.
I think, and one thing, if I may, Warden, is in conjunction with this, is we're kind of creating a hierarchy of our reporting to council, is the quarterly reports that will be provided by Ms. Robinson. They will include variance reports to what you're speaking of, but also forecasting going forward, talking about if we think that we're going to have an issue going forward or whichever. So that will they'll be linked together. So they'll be cross-referencing these documents. We'll look at putting some of that information in this document as well.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Fury.
The electronic reporting doesn't say anything about if you're out of the country or you're having a holiday. Or if you're having a holiday, so you can't zoom in then. Is that what that says?
I don't believe so. I think we can, under our procedure bylaw, we can make accommodations for virtual attendance, no matter where you are.
Okay, because that's not what it says on electronic participation at meetings.
What page are you on?
Well, I don't have my pages numbered for some
I
reason.
think it may be on the procedural.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, the procedure bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The procedure bylaw is in the next report, but it's through COVID, I believe that the procedure bylaw was amended
Okay.
to address the virtual attendance at meetings. And as long as the attendee has the capabilities wherever there are, we can get you in from.
And the warden approves.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, I'm good with that then.
Any other questions on the work plan?
No, I'd just like to say that's a lot of work and well done.
Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors McKechnie and Carter.
Be it resolved, the staff report CEO 7/2024 be received as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is an update to the agenda format and reporting.
Thank you. So as I believe I've spoken with council before and a lot of discussions with staff regarding just some administrative modifications to the way we do business. And a lot of it is to making sure we're focusing on content versus process. Well, and we're still obviously meet our statutory obligation as a municipal act, but I think there's a way we can actually create a better product that increases the level of information and frequency information that gets to council, the level of information that's easily accessible to members of the public or interested people with the work we do. And so as a result of that, we're recommending that council approve a new agenda format that really focuses on identifying kind of the who does what. Currently now there's a whole section on administrative reports and everybody's just kind of dropped in there. Now it will be clearly identified what department, what division. And the other thing we're going to add to it as well is the cover sheet for the agenda will now also include the recommendation being put forward on the report. So anybody that's just scanning online or a copy, they can actually go down just the agenda cover page without going through 75 pages of things to look for something, and it'll be linked back to the report. So just kind of improving some highlights. We have redesigned the staff report again from a front-facing standpoint. In fact, is to make it clear for people as to what the balance of the report is, because as you're aware, some reports can get quite detailed and quite deep. We're going to introduce basically what is, for lack of a better term, an executive summary portion of the report that will highlight the key issues at hand and the recommendations or the rationale behind the decisions that should generally appear right on the first page of the report, again, and then allowing you to go deeper in the report if you want more information on it, as well as tying in specifically impact of decision, be it financial, be it human relations standpoint, but more effectively how it would affect an individual member municipality. Whether it's all of them, whether it's one of them, whether it's none of them, that will be clearly identified in the report. So it'll say there'll be a category at the top that'll say, impact within organization, and it would include municipality Dysart and explain why or how it may impact Dysart or Highlands East or Algonquin Highlands, whichever, going forward. So that'll be included in the report. And lastly, sorry, I did jump over on the agenda standpoint. We are looking at piloting a consent agenda, which will take, and it's very clearly defined as to what can go on a consent agenda. So allowing more time for discussion on the issues of more complex issues, more topical issues for council's consideration of things that are just informationally based could all be passed under one single motion that's going through each one of them. So we're going to pilot that out for the next few months and get council's feedback on what they think and everything, both the report structure and the agenda structure itself. I would note that this report, if you notice, is actually in the new format compared to the other ones, just to give council a look at what the new report would look like. It's a little bit different, not a ton different, but I think it lays out a bit better. And we'll reevaluate through input from council, and then that over the next 6, 7, 8 months if we need to modify where we're going on that. So with that, ordinance open to any questions we have. And the last thing I will say is that we're looking to implement this for our August meeting. So you will see, subject to approval today, we will institute the new agenda for our August meeting. And at the same time, we're required to amend the procedural bylaw because the agenda is actually included in the procedural bylaw. So the amended bylaw will come to council at the same time in August.
And just as a point of clarification with respect to the consent agenda, anything that's included on the consent agenda, although it's all dealt with on a single resolution, if there's any item that anybody wishes to question or have more information about, it can be pulled when we're adopting the agenda and then added to that the departmental reports. Did you have a question, Councillor Fury?
I do, and I don't think there's anything you can do about it. Delegations. We don't stick to the timelines. And I don't understand. They give us the information 4 or 5 days before, and then they read it to us like we can't read. Like I tried to get municipal affairs yesterday I asked them if they could just capsule what was important in each section. They read the whole friggin' thing an hour. Like it drives you crazy when you've got the thing in your hand, you've read it. That's what we're supposed to do as counselors. and they read it to us again like we're kindergarten. I don't know what you can do about that.
What?
I think the warden's got to be really tough.
Through,
I try.
I know you.
through warden to you, Councillor Fury. Yes, that is a situation that doesn't go unnoticed by staff as well. But I think one thing we will try to do seriously is that as people, once we adopt a new process, because we separated presentations and delegations, very clearly defined rules. And as somebody submits a request for delegation, they will be informed of the rules, and it'll be strongly suggested, to your point, that if they have a 10-page report, we don't need to hear the whole 10-page report. We need the highlights of it. So we'll try to educate as we go along and cross our fingers that we have a pretty good success rate on that. Thanks.
Understanding that there are some issues that are more intricate than others, and we need to have some flexibility, but you know, with the average delegation, for instance, if somebody's coming in and asking for something, you know, it shouldn't need to take much longer than what we've outlined in our procedural bylaw. But I do like the separation between delegations and presentations, because presentations are often something we've asked for to inform ourselves with, as opposed to a request. Any other questions or Councillor Carter?
I think that this is great. The consent agenda, we recently adopted it in Minden Hills, and it's been terrific, because there are an awful lot of routine things that, you know, that are multi-step processes, and you know, you do 8 or 9 of them. To be able to cover it all off in one is makes a lot of sense and is a more efficient use of timing. 2 comments would make, I would prefer that correspondence move up to after delegations. And the reason for that is sometimes some of the correspondence could be items that will affect the discussions that are further on in the agenda. For instance, if we're talking about planning and, you know, there's correspondence from the government that says, hey, we've got new rules. You know, that, you know, I mean, I know that's probably, you know, a basic example, but it's, there is, I think there's going to be more correspondence in the future as opposed to less, particularly from the government. So having it out and spoken about prior to all the other considerations on the agenda, I think would be useful. The other thing is delegations. One of the things I note is that, you know, you want to receive the materials 7 days in advance. We, how to best put this? We've had a couple of examples where we've received delegation materials that was materials that we would not allow to be presented because they may have included defamatory statements, or they may have talked about things that were not within the purview of what the delegation was all about. It might be worthwhile to extend that a little bit. I know it's maybe seem unfair to some people, but the fact is that we are publishing these documents because our agenda goes out a week ahead of time. And if there's not time to review that, that could be problematic.
If you'd like to respond, and then we'll go to Councillor Royale.
Yeah, just on starting in second and going to the first one is, yeah, so we'll look at that respect to the timeline. It's just, it's sometimes it's difficult to get people in time. Our volume of delegations, unlike some of the local municipalities, is not quite as advanced as, or numerous as yours, I should say. But we definitely closely monitor them, and we'll track that going forward. With respect to correspondence, the intent here is this is what I'm going to say is this correspondence on the agenda is, I'm going to say, is relatively benign in nature. Any correspondence we receive that directly affects an operational or legislative authority of the municipality should be coming to council as part of one of the departmental reports. So we'll definitely focus on that and try to keep the correspondence truly as just purely informational, run of the mill, if you, for lack of a better term. But if it is an operational impact or a council impact or pending legislation change, then we will make sure it's incorporated as a staff report going forward.
Councillor Royale.
I was just going to more or less along what Mr. Dyke was talking about. In many cases, like I know in my case, there's gonna probably be a lot of correspondence coming out as the merger progresses or does not progress. I'm wondering if we could categorize that more as reference material rather than correspondence, and then put it into the section appropriate for that.
I think that's what Mr.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah. That's exactly.
That's
what-
the intent. So if it's, sorry.
Go ahead.
So that's the intent. If it's, again, if it's something that's altering what we're doing or may alter what we're doing, that would be handled. It would not be part of that section N. It would be part of a staff report or a agency report.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to receive the report on the agenda? Councillor Sphiri and Dayu.
The staff report CAO 08/2024 be approved and further that staff be directed to bring forward an amending bylaw for procedural bylaw 4193 to the August 28th, 24 meeting of County Council, recognizing the new council meeting agenda format.
All in favor? That's carried. Seem to have a considerable amount of turbulence outside.
Yes. Look at that night meeting all of a sudden.
Okay, next under reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. First up is the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge Health Unit. Anything to bring to our attention, Councillor Rao?
Well, first, I'd like to thank council for trusting me to represent you in the new health unit. I really enjoy it, and I'm totally committed to what I'm doing in that particular portfolio. There was no meeting in July. However, there is a merger meeting on Friday. I'm not sure what we're going to be getting. I think a lot of it is going to be related to where we stand with the potential funding. And again, I may or may not be able to report back to you depending on what the content is. But there is a meeting on Friday to deal with a merger issue.
Any questions for Councillor Rao? Next is point in time. Councillor Dayu.
Thanks. Yes, we had our board meeting last night and had a grim and important conversation about the anticipated closure of the Haliburton Office of the Children's Aid Society and the cut in staff locally by up to half. This is pretty serious stuff. It will have important and unforeseen consequences for our children and also for our local service providers, such as Point in Time. Point in Time at this early stage in the rollout of these changes is monitoring the situation, is anticipating a potential uptick in crisis calls if the Children's Aid Society is not able to offer the same level of service to families in crisis as it has up to now. It's really big news. And so I look forward, as we all do, to hearing more about what's going to happen directly from the Children's Aid Society and from Point in Time. And if I might say, I don't think that we're having these sorts of discussions enough at this table. I think these are the kinds of crucial underlying issues of our community that we could be discussing more, even if we don't have a direct say in what happens. And I would like to encourage that we hear from and talk to our local service providers more, so that we're more collectively in the loop. And as we progress through our usual county council decisions, that we're always applying the filter of family vulnerability, children's vulnerability, income vulnerability, aging population vulnerability through, into our decisions and through those filters. This is really, really big news for us.
I would think that some of that information would filter through to us through the community safety and well-being reports that we get and the work that committee is doing. I would also urge, I know that Algonquin Highlands received correspondence with respect to the Children's Aid and looking for support for Children's Aid, and it didn't go into the kind of detail that we're getting now, which is unfortunate. But, if in fact different councils have not supported that request, that maybe they rethink that and start making some statements with respect to our concerns here. Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, I agree. But in light of the anticipated closure of the Haliburton office, I also wonder if it's incumbent upon this table to put out a fairly strongly worded concern, perhaps on the back of what our local service providers have to say about that. Rather than it simply being a support of a call for support from the union.
Thoughts from other members of council on a resolution to that effect? Councillor McKechnie?
So is this about money?
If I may, yes. What we've been told is that for years now, the Kawartha Haliburton Children's Aid Society has been chronically underfunded and unable to provide services, which have meant that sometimes, and this is only one piece of the pie, but sometimes they've had to offer services through professional profit earning agencies, which increase the costs of providing those services. And that the chronic underfunding by the province has resulted in a multi-million-dollar deficit with no end in sight. And that severe measures have to be taken in order to end that deficit.
Well, I could say lots, but I'm only going to say it's just another example to me of our priorities being in the wrong order. And that comes from the powers to be above us, but also maybe even us. We pass a lot, we spend a lot of money around this table and all our tables in our municipalities. And this to me would be a priority. And I just don't understand why. Here's another thing, it just slips through the cracks. And if so many people in the county wouldn't even know this is going on unless they're watching this, or I'm sure there'll be something in the paper, but it'll be too late then. Right now, it might be too late. This is, to me, is just a prime example, and I know you get tired of me saying about priorities. Well, this is a priority to me.
I completely agree with you with respect to priorities, but I would also, with due respect, say that this is with respect to the province's priorities and where they put their priorities. That, I find rather astounding. And, it's not unsimilar, although that there are different circumstances associated with it, to the challenges that Triple HS had with having to hire contract nurses and how they were funded through the province and how that, we ended up in a pickle because of inability to provide the appropriate funding. Councillor Rael, I'm hearing that maybe we need to have you craft a bit of a resolution for consideration. Councillor
Yeah,
Rael.
I definitely agree with Councillor Dow. We need, it's not inside their jurisdiction. No question about that. It's a provincial issue. But at the end of the day, if we don't speak up for the organization and basically give them at least a letter of support that basically says, we hear your plea, we don't have any control over it, and we need to write it to the people who do have control over the funding. It may or may not accomplish anything, but at least it's a voice. And if enough people with enough voices do something, maybe something will change.
I think it needs to be more than a letter of support. To me, it needs to be a demand for action, but, or somewhere in between. Any other comments, Councillor Carter, then Councillor Fury?
Yeah, I think this is as Councillor Dayu mentioned, realistically, up until whatever, 4 or 6 weeks ago, I had no idea about all of this. I had no idea about the multi-million-dollar deficit. I had no idea that I just assumed there's a chronic shortage of staffing and everywhere, but, I did not know the level of seriousness of this. And then it gets, and maybe it is, as Councillor McKechnie says, in priorities, but all of a sudden it gets to this crisis point, and us trying to hastily put something together it's very, very difficult at this time. I agree, it needs to be some sort of a demand for action, but we would have a similar response if we were told that they were closing the high school, or they were, there are various other things that happen in our community. It would be nice if we knew about these things a little bit more. I don't know what the province's side of this argument is. So it's a little bit, again, we had recently the idea of them closing the labs that do the inspections for, whatever it was, water testing and so on. We seem to be not being informed of very important things that affect our municipalities and until they get to a crisis. So yes, a demand for action, but unfortunately, this is probably going to be another one of those, too little, too late. So I agree, but we somehow have got to get on top of these things a little bit better. I will say that, with community safety and well-being, hopefully these things will come to the fore a little bit earlier. Recently in our meetings, we had some issues with mental health that came up that were, there were there were two very different stories that were coming out that we're trying to reconcile. So, hopefully it'll come out through the community safety and well-being, but, for now it didn't. And so, yeah, let's demand some action for all that we'll do.
Councillor Fury?
Well, I think, can we not put together a resolution here saying the severity of the cuts, how they're going to affect children, send it to the premier, the minister involved, Laurie Scott. At least we're taking some action. And I think we can do that today. And
We will give our CAO a moment to craft something that we might. Councillor Rail?
Just, I, looking back at some of the things that were made aware to the general public, I'm wondering if this is one of those situations where we can encourage our newspapers and news media who may be listening to this particular session to use their influence as soon as they can to make this a much more public situation, so that our entire region knows what is going on. Because if they can mobilize in a short period of time, that's unbelievable what our people can do.
Councillor Carter?
Perhaps whatever this resolution or demand is, we can also issue it as a press release. That way it would, because the newspapers aren't there to fight for us, but they are there to report. And if we put it out as a press release, that hopefully can galvanize some people into supporting.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Good recommendation. So we'll add that note to the resolution. No, we're trying to get away from all the whereases. That's all right.
a little clunky, but we'll see where we go from there. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council inform the Premier of the extreme negative impact of the anticipated Children's Aid Office closure and corresponding reduction in staff that will have on our broader community, and further that request that these harmful cuts be reconsidered, and further that the warden be directed to arrange a meeting with the province in this regard in the near. I'll work on that wording, but.
I think we should maybe change that part to, that we do a press release.
With respect, I don't think we need that in the resolution.
We can do that.
We can do that anyways. We'll craft a press release based on information that Councillor Dawood can provide, that we'll forward through.
Okay.
Right.
Comments on what's being proposed for a resolution? Councillor Carter?
Yeah, I know that this is not something we often do, but could we say demands meeting?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so I'll change, if I might, I'll change that, and further that county council demand a meeting with the minister and member Scott. Okay.
Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Dayoud and Carter?
Minister says that Jones again? No, that's. Yes, and member Scott.
All in favor? That's great.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Councillor Dayoud. Next on the agenda is a report on the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, and I am going to rely on our CAO to report on these two items. As I was unable to attend, they've scheduled their last meeting at the same time as our council meeting, so I was unable to attend, but our CAO was in attendance.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. So item one is just purely for information. It's good news. It's good news on a project that is a housing project spearheaded by the County of Frontenac. I believe they did appear before County Council to talk about their communal service program. They were able to secure $1 million worth of funding through CMHC to advance that program going forward. So that's a good news program. And on this part, the positive side is it's the recognition that CMHC is having on innovation and new ways of providing service, particularly in municipalities like ourselves, more rural based, doesn't have the access to the hard services that exist elsewhere. So that was good news on that part. The second part coming out that's before us today is a requested resolution of support regarding calling for significant, predictable, and consistent funding for rural and small municipalities, particularly in Eastern Ontario, but across the board. As council is aware, the province recognizes the rural needs of Northern Ontario. They recognize the small urban needs of Southwestern Ontario, but there seems to be a lack of understanding of the impact of the needs of Eastern Ontario, particularly in specific areas like ourselves. Infrastructure is the dominant part. We've had lots of conversations today about the needs of infrastructure, the dominant part of our financing going forward. Recent studies have shown that in the past 13 years, the capital infrastructure deficit in Eastern Ontario has gone from 5.8 billion from 3.7 billion to 5.8 billion dollars. One of the biggest problems we have in Ontario is that we're wholly dependent upon the tax base, on the property tax, to bring in resources. That aspect is further exacerbated in Haliburton County, because whereas the provincial average is roughly about 20% residential property tax covers their revenues, ours is 70%. That's the basis of our tax base is on the residential property tax. Of that, $5.8 billion, while the numbers may sound small in comparison, but in relationship to ourselves, between 2024 and 2034, there's a $73 million infrastructure expectation within Haliburton County. Under our current financial plan going forward, which should increase, we're looking for roughly about a 3% rate increase every year over the next 10 years. We would still end up with an $18 million infrastructure gap. sort of running the math backwards is you're actually looking at probably needing a 5% increase, tax rate increase to accommodate the monies needed. Now, council took some positive steps forward with respect to the dedicated tax levy into infrastructure, but it's still a tax levy. And so what we're looking at doing is taking this information and requesting the province, I'll read the specifics in a minute, is that they take a closer look at the programs they run, that they actually address the needs of rural Eastern Ontario going forward. A lot of the programs, they try to use a one program covers all. The needs of the GTHA, the needs of Southwestern Ontario are considerably different than Eastern Ontario, particularly when you look at the fact that the growth rates in Eastern Ontario on a per capita basis are actually higher in Eastern Ontario than they are in the larger urban centers going forward. And on top of that, Ontario has the lowest per capita from the provincial standpoint, the lowest per capita investment in infrastructure in any province in Ontario. We're one of the wealthiest provinces, but we spend the least amount of money on the most expensive things for smaller municipalities like ourselves. So going forward, as I said before, is the current state of affairs is not sustainable over time. They're slowly eating away at almost 100%, like the levels of revenues that we have to generate to pay for these needed services, because this actually doesn't count any new services. This is what we need to maintain our existing service levels going forward. And so the UWC put out a very, and it's in your package today, a very detailed and very well drafted policy paper on the state of municipal infrastructure in Eastern Ontario. And out of that, the recommendation come forward, I think it's worth reading these out for you, is that we are requesting that both the federal and provincial government assist in addressing the growing infrastructure debts that are faced by the municipalities in Eastern Ontario and any unique features that exist in rural Ontario, any rural Eastern Ontario, similar to what they've done in the North. They've done a very good job identifying the needs of the North. They now apply the same principles and recommend needs in the East. And so I'll just quickly highlight the pieces of this recommendation. Ensure eligibility for programs and funding fits both rural and small urban circumstances. That federal and provincial funding programs are consistent. They have to be a case in point is the OCIF funding, which we currently receive, which we gratefully reserved from the province. It has decreased by 15% each year over the last 2 years, and we're expecting a further 15% going into 2025. So we need that to be addressed. Investment in housing goes hand in hand. They talk about the need to bring housing forward. They've passed, as you heard earlier from Ms. Purcell, they passed legislation about to facilitate building of houses. If we can't put the infrastructure in the ground, we can't support the housing. So the two go hand in hand, and there must be a link put forward going forward. And also looking at the reevaluation of debt funding options open to municipalities, because yes, we can borrow money, but that's, again, we have to pay the money back. So it has a further impact on our going forward. I'm a big believer in there is good debt municipalities can take on, but there still is only so much debt we can take on. And it needs to be addressed. And lastly, there needs to be a re-examination of the financial agreements between the province and municipalities in Ontario with respect to how we generate revenue. The property tax system is an antiquated system that was put in place in the 1840s. It doesn't work in 2024 anymore. And so we need to work with, create a program that addresses those needs and how we raise funds and how we, instead of relying on the tax base again, because as you're all aware, particularly in our area, it's a regressive tax. It has no bearing on how much money you make or what resources you have available. It's based on something you may have inherited, you've owned for 40 years. And so the ability to pay becomes a true aspect that we closely have to look at every year when we're putting our financial pieces together. And so on that, again, is encouraging the province to, through EUWC, through AMO, through ROMA, whichever body they want to converse with, is that the Financial Accountability Office has to identify the missing data as it applies to Eastern Ontario. And that's where this report does a very good job identifying that missing data, and create a better methodology for estimating the infrastructure needs, but also how we're going to pay for them going forward. So with that, and if you bear with me, and if you don't mind, it's in your package. I'm not going to read the 7 whereases on top of it. I'm just going to get into the meat of it, which is the, if I might, Warden.
Yeah, absolutely.
That the County of Haliburton joins the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in calling on the federal Ontario governments to immediately and sustainably partner with municipal governments by investing in both the new and ongoing maintenance and repairs of municipal infrastructure in Eastern Ontario's small rural municipalities. And that the federal Ontario governments immediately review data and work together to implement solutions based on the EUWC's municipal infrastructure policy paper in partnership with small rural municipalities.
Questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to that resolution? Councillor McKechnie and Burton. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you for that. Next is the Joint Social and Housing Services Committee. Any updates or news there?
No, our next meeting is early in September. There was work done on to hopefully have some delegations at AMO, but we have not heard yet.
If I might.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, I do apologize. I haven't brought this forward to council. It's my understanding that they have, the minister has created a joint session with respect to the Landlord Tenant Act piece that was brought up, Councillor. That'll involve us, CKL, and I think there's a number of other municipalities that they've created a separate session just to deal specifically with that issue. And that's what we've heard back from to date.
Okay, next is the Professional Recruitment Committee, and you've heard from our recruiter, and we've pretty much dealt with that today. The only other sort of semi-related issue is that you'd see that there's a call for trying to set a date for a meeting between HHS and the mayors and deputy mayors, and possibly other members of council to just give us an update on where they stand. With respect to the library board, Councillor Sell, if I understand, there's been a switch between yourself and Councillor Dayu on who the vice chair of the board is. So I guess it would be then become more appropriate for Councillor Dayu to provide any reports. Over to you, Councillor Dayu.
I don't have anything prepared.
Well, you're the deputy chair. No,
Yeah.
sorry.
And I've been away for almost a month, so perhaps for this occasion, we could revert back to the normal.
Back to you, Councillor Shell.
Certainly. I was just going to say that we did not have a board meeting in the month of July. However, if I would, encourage everyone in the community as well as council members to go to the Haliburton County Library webpage, because there's lots of events and fun activities for, kids that are out of school currently and adults as well. So other than that, that was it.
Great. Thanks very much. Okay, you've all seen the report on or is there a report coming to us on the land division, or just receiving resolution? Mover and a seconder then to receive the land division's activity report. Councillor Fury, Councillor Royale, thank you.
Be resolved that the Haliburton County Council received planning report PLN 13/2024 for July 2024 as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Under Eastern Ontario Regional Network updates, as you're aware, I'm no longer on that board, but there is a monthly update there for our information to see where we stand with the projects. Anything on poverty reduction? Okay, next is under other business. We have the composition of the Police Detachment Board. And I think we might be hearing from Ms. Tiffin.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of council.
Good morning.
Before you is a report on the Haliburton County OPP Detachment Board composition. Council has previously directed staff to commence the process to make a change request in the composition of the Detachment Board, converting the appointment for one appointment member of County Council to an appointment of an additional community member. Staff have made that change request through the Ministry of the Solicitor General, or SolGen, and SolGen staff have confirmed receipt of the change request. They are currently facilitating official approvals of the request to amend the regulation. Staff are seeking direction from council today to initiate the process to recruit 2 community members for appointment to the County of Haliburton OPP Detachment Board and the related term.
If I can add one thing to Ms. Tiffin's report, is the second community member is pending the approval of the province. We have no reason to suspect it won't happen. It's just a timing thing. So there would be a bit of a lag on putting the second, could be a bit of a lag on putting the second community member board, but we think it's important that we start the process now.
Okay, and with respect to options,
If I can
Yeah.
just clarity, under the legislation, the community members, that their term cannot exceed the term of council. So any appointment this time would just go through until 2026. And then the next iteration of council would be requested to make the appointments going forward. So it's a bit different this year, but it would be for a 2-year term or 2 one-year terms, whatever the determination of council is.
I would almost think that it would be more appropriate for us to look at 2-year terms so that there's some continuity of membership. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time for new members on a board to become familiar with the territory, and they no sooner start to understand what's going on and they're gone. But I would look for comments or thoughts from members of council. Councillor Carter.
If we do that, I would suggest that it be sort of offset by whatever, 6 months or so. In other words, if we have a new council that starts in October, and there's a meeting in November of the Police Detachment Board, they don't have to appoint new members in the next, 2 weeks. So there should be some overlap or something like that.
If I might, so yeah, so the membership would continue until the new appointees are decided by council within that frame.
Any other comments or questions, Councillor Burton, and then Councillor Dayu?
Just about your suggestion of a 2-year term. I would suggest maybe a 1-year term, and then we could certainly review it. I guess my concern would be if we got someone that maybe didn't suit our needs of the board.
Point taken. Councillor Dayu.
This is not regarding terms. This is regarding selection process. So I don't know if you wanted to.
Anyone else got a comment that they'd like to make or preference with respect to length of term? We've got 1 or 2 saying 2 years and 1 saying 1 year, and it's a point well taken. So I guess we need some other thoughts on that. Councillor Shell.
Just to clarify, so what Councillor Burton is suggesting is for the member of the public that it would be a 1-year term, but the rest of council, when they do it, it is the full term of council. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Well, then it's not really a bad point. And maybe you might get more applications if people were only going to be with the need of only, dedicating 1 year of their life instead of 2. You may get more applications, maybe better applications. And that's not to say if that person, was fitting in well and enjoyed it, that they couldn't apply again, reapply, and could be chosen again. So I think I support that decision.
Okay. I'm seeing some nods, so I guess we're looking at the 1 year for public.
May I add a one-time wrinkle to that?
Sure.
Sorry, as it is the end of July in 2024, if it could actually be for the first iteration of it, it would be the point would be to the end of this term of council, which is maybe roughly 1.5 years, right? So if that just for this iteration, and then it would kick in, the 1-year appointment would start in 2026, if that's agreeable to council, because you're going to have a bit of kind of a funky overlap here.
Yeah. Okay. So your question, Councillor Dayu?
I do, and it's with regard to the selection of the community member. In the literature provided, I see specified individuals. What about representatives of local service providers who work with vulnerable folks in our community who have a good insider view on police relationships with folks in our community.
If I might, I think as approved, my interpretation of it is you're appointing a member of the community. What they bring with them is a consideration on the appointment. So as you're receiving as applications come in to sit on the board, as you're doing your review metrics on who to select, that would be, if you're looking at skills-based or whichever, that would be one of them is, that would be a consideration of the approval authority going forward. One thing that Ms. Tiffin and I talked about from approval standpoint is the first and this is a determination council has to make, is going forward is from a process standpoint, the first iteration is actually approved by council full and like the recruitment, the vetting, and then as you get into the second iteration, the advertising and vetting of the candidates goes through the board, who then recommends to council. So I think, I know I answered your question plus, but I think the first part is your comment should be a consideration of the candidate, not a requirement of the candidate.
Yeah, okay.
But would be taken into
That's correct.
consideration.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? It looks to me like we need to slightly amend the resolution that we've got, because it goes option 1 or option 2 as opposed to, or does one of the options say the end of the term of council?
If I might, we can leave the approval based on the 1-year term. And when we appoint the member, the community members going forward, we can specifically state that they're till the end of term. And then, so we don't have to come back for a separate approval for council.
So, Councillor Carter.
Just one thing, noticing here that you want the applicants by the 12th of August, which is only a couple of weeks away, and we don't even have a meeting scheduled. I'm just wondering if we could have a little bit more grace on that number.
Yes,
Since
we
people
can.
are on vacation and all sorts of things.
We definitely can give it some more grace. Our goal was to get the stuff back to council for our meeting on the 26th or 28th of August. So that we can actually get as much complement on the board moving. We can adjust that as per the direction of council.
So we could extend it for at least another week. Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder then to move that forward? Councillors Fury and Carter.
Be it resolved that staff report CSWB 04/2024 be received and staff be directed to initiate the process for the recruitment of 2 community members to the County of Haliburton OPP Detachment Board, and further that the members be appointed for a 1-year term.
All in favor? That's carried.
So will
Go
that
ahead.
be posted on the website so that we can direct people to go to somewhere that has these documents?
Yeah, so we can post on the county website. I can ask our member municipalities to share on their websites as well as our social media. I noticed that in other municipalities as well, some have shared that they've actually released a press release noting that we're looking for community members so that it can be further reported in the papers as well.
Okay, the item that we added under other business was the appointment to a HHS board. Given the withdrawal of Councillor Fury, I've spoken to members of council, and I would like to recommend that Councillor Dayu be appointed to HHS at this point in time. If I could have a mover and a seconder to that effect. Councillor Fury, Councillor Royale.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council appoints Councillor Dayu to the Haliburton Highlands Health Services Board, and the staff be directed to present the necessary appointment bylaw.
All in favor? That's okay. All in favor. Gets carried. The next item is a correspondence from AMO on a joint health resolution. I'm not sure what council's thinking is about this. Any comments or questions? Go ahead.
Just quickly, Warren Danielson, similar to my commentary on the infrastructure piece as well. This is AMO is working very hard in conjunction with local municipalities and health organizations to impress upon the needs the physician recruitment needs and the advancement of that within municipalities across Ontario, particularly in the rural sector as well. This resolution is quite similar to the infrastructure one. And I think it may be indicative, but it's somewhat ironic in the sense that in addition to being the lowest spending province on infrastructure, we're also the lowest spending province on healthcare spending on Canada as well. So it's this resolution would, if I quickly go through it, that comes from AMO itself, that the Council for the County of Haliburton urges the province of Ontario to recognize the physician shortage in Haliburton County and Ontario, to fund healthcare appropriately and ensure that every Ontarian has access to physician care.
Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Rail, Councillor McKechnie. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we have no closed session today. Under bylaws, we have a bylaw to authorize the signing of the municipal funding agreement for community building funds. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that bylaw? Councillor Carter, and second by Councillor Shell.
Be it resolved that bylaw, sorry, I got the wrong one. Forgive me. It almost made it through the whole meeting. Yeah, the bylaw to authorize warden and clerk to execute the municipal funding agreement, bylaw 4255, be read a first, second, and third time.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of motion? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillors Carter and Royale.
Be it resolved that bylaw 4256 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the July 24th, 2024 meeting of Haliburton County Council be read a first, second, and third time.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, could I have a motion to adjourn our regular session? Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Royale.
Be it resolved that the June 26, 2024 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned at 12:07 p.m.
All in favor? That's carried.